to benefit all sentient beings.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just noticed a few minutes ago, I realized I never sent you the video about the numbers. I just did. I just sent it to you. Okay. All right. Okay, let's start with chapter 17, how the mind engages its objects. In a way, it would have been good to start with that, I guess. But then again, yeah, well, hard to say. And I guess most of it is quite easy since we've mentioned it so many times. We talked so much about the different objects. Okay, so this is called objects of mind. Well, how the mind engages its objects of mind. And the authors are saying, having completed the presentation of types of mind in the preceding chapters, so we only have 7 left, but everything, all the other divisions we went through, we will now discuss how mind engages its object. What does engage mean? What does it mean to engage an object?
Apprehend might be
Yeah,
okay.
apprehend is good. Apprehend is good. The definition of an object is that which is known by a mind. Okay. Actually, in Tibetan, well, in terms of how some of the terminology has been translated up till now, in Tibetan it means Lorig. That's the Tibetan. So Lo has been translated as cognition, and Rigpa has been translated as aware of. Now, if I use the same terminology that has been used up to this point, the definition of an object would be that which cognition is aware of. What do you think? That which is that which cognition is aware of. Would that be acceptable for the definition of an object? That which an object is aware of.
No, it's not.
Okay, it follows that the definition, whatever fulfills the definition, is not necessarily the object, or whatever is the object does not necessarily, whatever is an object does not necessarily fulfill the definition. Which one is it?
You mean the definition that you just gave?
Say that again. Sorry. Yeah, take a microphone. That's good.
You mean the definition that you just gave?
Yeah, this definition in here. So whatever fulfills this particular definition, it follows it's not necessarily an object or the other way around.
The other way around.
Okay, so whatever is an object is not necessarily that which, well, let's use the definition being consistent with the terminology, is not necessarily that which cognition is aware of.
Accept.
Posited.
An object that appears to eye consciousness but is not ascertained.
It follows that it is that which cognition is aware of.
That is.
So according to you, that is an object, but it's not that which cognition is aware of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I say regarding the subject, or no, take the subject what is it, Vas, which is the object of an awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained. It follows it is not that which cognition is aware of.
Accept.
It follows that it is that which cognition is aware of because an omniscient mind is aware of it.
No operation.
Oh, if a cognition mind is aware of it, a cognition is not aware of it. It follows that the omniscient mind of a Buddha is not a cognition.
Okay, I see.
Right. So it follows, therefore, whatever is an object is necessarily that which cognition is aware of.
Accept.
And whatever is that which cognition is aware of is necessarily an object.
Well, what about
Go ahead.
So it has the fault of underprovision because it does not include non-existence, such as a blue.
Such as a what?
A blue mountain.
A blue mountain, a blue snow mountain. Take the subject. Take the subject, a blue snow mountain. It follows. It is that which the cognition is aware, which a cognition is aware of.
Why?
Oh, it follows. It is an object.
Oh, wait, no. Yeah, it is that which cognition is aware of.
Okay. All right.
Not
Is
an
okay. It is not. It follows that is not an object.
Except, yes.
It follows it is not that which cognition is aware of.
Why?
Okay.
It follows it is that which a cognition is aware of.
Except.
Okay. It follows whatever is an object is necessarily that which a cognition is aware of, and whatever is that which is a which is a cognition is aware of is necessarily an object.
Why?
Well, because I just asked you, is it a cognition object? You said yes. I ask you, is it that which cognition is aware of? You said yes.
No, I said why to the second one.
But I said not. It follows that it's not a cognition of which the object is aware of. And you said why? I said it follows. So let's do it again. The subject, the blue snow mountain. It follows it is not an object. You said why?
Yeah, it is an
And I
object.
said, so it is an object. Regarding the subject, take the subject, the blue snow mountain. It follows it is that which cognition is not aware of.
Oh, it's that which cognition is not aware of.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay. So it follows it is that which cognition is aware of. It is an object and it's that which cognition is aware of. So it
Except-
follows it is not an object or is not an example of something. It is not an example of something that is of like a non-pervasive object. I don't know how you say that in like what's the term you usually use. Follows is not an example of something where one of these two, either that which is being defined or the definition given here, are not fulfilled. I ask you, is it an object? You said yes. I ask you, is it that which cognition is aware of? You said yes.
No,
So
no,
you
I
said
said
perversion was too
Yes.
small.
cognition is aware of.
So it is that which cognition is aware of.
Why?
It follows it is that which cognition is aware of. Oh, so it follows it is an object, but it's not that which cognition is aware of.
No,
I would say that it's not an object.
it's not an object, but it is that which, but it is.
I asked you before, is it an object? You said yes. But Kelsey is right. It's not an object.
Yeah.
You got a little confused. Never mind. So yeah, let's do it again. Take the subject, a blue snow mountain. It follows it is not an object.
Except.
Except, okay. It follows it is that which cognition is aware of.
Except.
Yes, okay. So it follows that it's not an object, but it's that which cognition is aware of. It follows it is an object because it's an object of a particular mind. Oh, if something is the object of a particular mind, it follows it doesn't necessarily exist.
Except.
If something is perceived by a particular mind, it follows it is not perceived by mind. What happened? Denzin, you didn't. Can you please mute yourself? Can you mute your sound?
Normal.
Denzin, you didn't. Please mute yourself. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Say something, please. Serkong Institute.
Then,
Okay. Yeah.
if it is perceived by a particular mind, it necessarily exists.
I'll just have a quick question. Where's Anastasia and where's Achana?
Today, Anastasia has a flu.
Okay. And Anastasia,
Archana?
Achana, is she?
Where Archana is.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen her in a while, but now I noticed she's not there. Okay, never mind. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Texture, you were saying?
If it is perceived by a particular mind, it
Mhm.
necessarily exists.
If it is perceived by you cut out. Let me repeat what I think you said. If it is perceived by a particular mind, it is necessarily perceived by a mind.
No, if it's perceived by a particular mind, it necessarily exists.
Oh, if it's perceived by a particular mind, it necessarily exists. Okay. If it's perceived by a mind, it also necessarily exists.
Yeah, I guess there wouldn't be any difference there.
Okay. So if it's perceived, if a mind is aware of it, it necessarily exists.
Why?
If a particular mind is aware of it, if a particular mind perceives it, it necessarily exists, and the two are similar. The reasoning is similar.
The reasoning's not similar.
Why
Bec-
not?
Perceive implies valid cognition.
Perceive replies perceive and realize. It follows that perceive and realize are the same.
Well, they're not the same, but they're mutually inclusive. Yeah.
The same, yeah. I mean, yeah, synonymous.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, they're synonymous. It follows it's not synonymous because the word for the Tibetan word for perceive is to be aware, to notice. It's not to realize. I mean, we're using the same meaning as it's given in the dictionary, and it definitely doesn't say that you have to know your object. Usually the word perceive is used synonymous with apprehend.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that we were using it in that way. So
Okay. No, fair enough. I mean, the thing is, of course, we can only follow here the English meaning. The way Geshe Thupten Jinpa, for instance, uses it is the same as appear. So then it would be more absurd, right? But okay, let's say, okay, if you want to use it as in like perceive means to realize, okay, never mind. Okay, so if a particular mind realizes its object, of course it has to exist. But if a particular mind, if a particular cognition is aware of something, it follows it doesn't have to exist.
except
And if a particular if a particular cognition is aware of something, it follows that a cognition in general is aware of that.
Okay. Is cognition, when you're using cognition, is that mutually inclusive with mind?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
According to the translation here, it's the word lo, which is synonymous with mind. Yeah. So if a particular cognition is aware of something, then cognition in general is aware of that particular thing, that particular object.
Okay,
And if
we can
that's true, if something is an object of a particular cognition, then it must also be an object. Because if I know a particular cognition is aware of something, then a cognition in general has to be aware of it, and the reasoning is the same. You see where I'm coming from? I'm saying when you talk about an object, so if there's something, if something is the object of a particular cognition, I say it has to be an object in general, because if a particular cognition is aware of an object, a cognition has to be aware of an object, and the reasoning is similar. Do you see the similarity? Like I'm saying a particular object of a particular cognition. If something is a particular object of a cognition, if something is an object, it follows that if something is an object of a particular cognition, it has to be an object. Because if a particular cognition is aware of something, a cognition is aware of that something, and the reasoning is similar.
I don't think the reasoning is similar.
Why not?
I would say that cognition in general is a valid cognizer, but there are particular cognitions that are not.
Say that again. Sorry. I didn't hear.
Cognition in general is a valid cognizer, refers to a valid cognizer, but there are particular
but
not
so
valid
whatever is it follows that whatever is a cognition is a valid cognition.
Why?
You said cognition is in general is a valid cognizer.
Yeah,
Oh,
if
you're
we're
saying
talking,
just in general. So a cognizer in general has to be a valid cognizer.
yes.
So you're saying not what, okay, but then again, we go back to this Blue Snow Mountain. It follows it's not that which cognition is aware of, because cognition here is used in general, and you're saying that cognition in general must be a valid cognizer, right? Okay, all right, never mind. That's just as a little bit of debate. But going back to the text. Okay. Yeah, so that which is known by a mind. It's also okay to say that which is known by a mind. The question is just, what does it mean to know something? It becomes really difficult because in Tibetan it says Rigpa, and Rigpa means to be aware of. So does the translator here refer to knowing? Does the translator here mean to know, means to realize something? And it would have to be that. It would have to be that. But then before she just used the word aware. Anyway, so there's a bit of a debate, but it's more about what term to use when you translate. Okay, so when categorized, there are 4 types of objects of mind. Okay, appearing object, observed object, conceived object, and engaged object. All right, so you see here number 3, that's Shenyu. So in the beginning, and I didn't see this until I started reading this today. It says conceived object, but previously the translator used construed object. And I said that's, and according to my understanding, not a good idea. Conceived object is better. And here it is conceived object, which is the same as Shenyu in Tibetan. Okay, so appearing object, observed object. Observed object, that's the Tibetan Sunyu, which is actually synonymous with appearing object. Now here in this case, you have to use another word because 4 different objects are listed, which means without saying observed object, I mean, without differentiating between appearing object, which is nayu, and observed object in Tibetan being suyu, you won't have a list of 4. But I'm still wondering, and please help me with that, because I don't think observed object is a good choice. The thing is, in Tibetan, for instance, the term implies that which is to be apprehended, and that's just the etymology, that which is to be apprehended. So in other words, that which can be apprehended is apprehendable to a certain degree. It means that. But of course, not everything that is the appearing object is apprehended by a particular mind. In the Prasangika school, things are a little different. In the Prasangika school, they say that every mind realizes its appearing object. I've said that before in one of the previous classes. It's part of the text as well. The text mentions it. So any kind of mind, even the wrong consciousness, is said to realize something, which I think which actually makes a lot of sense. Like even though you're mistaken with regard to your main object, you still know what appears to you. For instance, an eye consciousness apprehending a blue snow mountain. I know that I see a blue snow mountain. I know I see that because I realize the appearance of a blue snow mountain. They don't accept reflexive awarenesses. There are no self-knowers in the Prasangika school. And they say, well, just by knowing the object, of course, you know that you've seen it. Therefore, it makes sense. If you always know what appears to your mind, then of course, later on, you can remember having seen something having appeared to you at least, right? Okay, so in the Prasangika school, they say, even if it's a wrong consciousness, so mistaken consciousness anyway, but even in the case of a wrong consciousness, the appearing object is always realized. So then to say it's that which can be apprehended in the sense of like, at least it's observed. Okay, so you could use the word observed here in the Prasangika school, it would work. But in the lower schools, it's a little difficult. I was thinking, what about observable object that is not necessarily observed, but the mind has the ability. So it's like an observable object. It's not that much better. It sounds really awkward. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, then please share them with everyone. Instead of observe, because observe usually means a visual object. You observe something, you spend some time looking at it. And that is just, in this context, yeah, I don't know. Any suggestions? Or maybe think about it if there's nothing. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, Gonzalo.
No, so I was wondering what's exactly the object that we're talking about. Like I didn't get.
Okay, I'll repeat it. The appearing object and the observed object are synonymous. in Tibetan, you have two words for the appearing object. And we've went through this a few times in the past where it said observed object. I mean, when we went through the earlier chapters, when we discussed the earlier chapters, on a few occasions, the translators used observed object, kept saying observed object. And I said, well, observed object, it's misleading because nothing is observed. It's the appearing object. It's basically equivalent or it's synonymous with the appearing object. And I find that a little bit misleading. It's that which is to be apprehended. That's what it means in Tibetan, literally, the apprehended object, or that which is to be apprehended, the object that is to be apprehended, using the future tense.
So is there
yeah.
why there are two categories?
Pardon?
Is there a reason why they are two different categories?
The text just mentioned two words. The text mentioned them. So don't ask me why. Maybe that was the vocabulary that was used in India, possibly even at the time of the Buddha. And so the Buddha used that same vocabulary. Very difficult to trace it back. I mean, there's no record of why it was used that way. But observed object is really, it's a difficult term. Anyway, I think it's enough to discuss it so you become aware of the fact that it's a little difficult to use this translation, but I can't come up with an alternative translation. Maybe you could think about it today, like as your homework. Come up with an alternative that actually implies appearing object, so synonymous with appearing object. Yes, someone wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe like potentially observed object or something of that nature.
Yeah, potentially observed. Okay, that makes it a little longer. Potentially observed. All right. Okay. Yeah. So maybe that would be an alternative. Anyway, you're all invited to think of a synonymous term, something that is synonymous with appearing object. Okay. The appearing object, and here it says the observed object are synonymous, and every consciousness has both. So every consciousness has, of course, when it has an appearing object, it also has what is called here an observed object, because Zuyul and Nayul are synonymous. The Tibetan terms are synonymous, and therefore the English as well. As for the appearing object and the observed object of a non-conceptual consciousness, so just think of appearing object. You're more familiar with that term. It's also used more frequently in Tibetan. So take the appearing object of a non-conceptual consciousness, such as an I consciousness. So they are the object of non-conceptual consciousness by virtue of their image clearly appearing to that consciousness. Image. Image, because, well, image I don't think is a good word. That's why I'm also not a great fan of the generic image, since that implies a visual image. I don't think you can talk about an audio image. No. And here the Tibetan word is number. Number has so many different translations, so many different meanings. But here I think a mental aspect, like a mental aspect, by virtue of their mental aspect clearly appearing to that consciousness, or aspect, not mental. Sorry, I shouldn't say mental. Especially, in the Sautrantika school, their aspect clearing appearing to that consciousness. And there are quotes when it says that the aspect of something is the thing itself. So by virtue of the aspect of the vase is the vase. I know in English you would say it's like the facet or the feature of the vase. The Tibetan word also has that meaning in certain contexts, but in this context, I don't even know whether aspect is a good word, but an image anyway. So an aspect clearly appearing to that consciousness. Here, aspect of vase meaning vase itself, when we talk about an I consciousness apprehending vase, then an image or an aspect of the vase clearly appears to that consciousness. As for the appearing object and the observed object of a conceptual consciousness, they are the appearance that is the direct object of a conceptual cognition when its object occurs to it. So when it has a particular object that is apprehended by it, you have, of course, a meaning generality. And that here, the meaning generality here is the appearing object. They are thus the appearance that was explained previously to be the linguistic referent. Back to the linguistic referent. I mean, I'm actually gonna talk to the translator probably this winter. I'm gonna call her because I have to translate also the second book into German and just ask her why she chose this particular term. Or yeah, I don't know, but maybe I'll send an email to the other translators. But the point is here, if you were to say regarding the subject, take the subject, a conceptual mind apprehending the sound, the word was. So it follows it follows that the appearing object, the meaning generality of that word, is the linguistic referent of that word. Right? I mean, if it were take the word was, the conceptual consciousness apprehending the word was. If the meaning generality of the word was were the linguistic referent of the word was, it'd be absurd. Do you see the debate I'm presenting, or the debate here I'm mentioning? So to say that the linguistic referent of the word was is the meaning generality is yeah, I don't know why linguistic referent. Why they choose this term. Since they've been using universal anyway, might as well use universal here as well. Even though the Tibetan word here is datun, datun is synonymous with generality, or meaning, well, not meaning generality, but generality, mental generality, or tunji in Tibetan. Yeah, chi as like this mental image or mental generality, and so therefore just use universal if there's no other word. Anyway, even though the direct object is not itself a real thing, in Tibetan it says a functioning thing. Even though the direct object, so what is the direct object of the eye consciousness apprehending, for instance, the conceptual consciousness apprehending a vase? What is the direct object? It is the meaning generality of the vase. So that itself is not a functioning thing. That is something involved in a causal process. So here the translators chose the word real, but I guess functioning thing would be clearer. And then you could, of course, still mention the brackets or include the brackets. According to the explanations of some earlier Buddhist epistemologists, it is not contradictory for a conditioned thing to be a direct object of a conceptual cognition. A direct object, it will be explained on the next page. So there's a difference between the appearing object and the direct object. What could the difference be? What could be the difference here when it says a consciousness, for instance, an eye consciousness apprehending, not eye consciousness, sorry, conceptual consciousness apprehending vase. Take the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase. So its direct object itself is not a real thing or a functioning thing. It's not impermanent. But it's not contradictory for a conditioned thing, for an impermanent thing, to be the direct object of a conceptual cognition. All right. So why does it say even though the direct object itself is not impermanent? Why does it say here? Why does it say this?
Because the appearing object could still be impermanent.
It means the appearing object has to be impermanent.
You
Right?
don't-
It says here, even though the direct object is not itself a functioning thing.
Mm.
Even though the direct object is not, so it follows, therefore, that the direct object is permanent. The
Except-
direct object of a conceptual consciousness apprehending vase is permanent.
Except
Yes. Okay, posit that direct object,
meaning generality.
the meaning generality of the vase. Very good. However, as it says here, whatever is, it's not contradictory for a conditioned thing to be a direct object of a conceptual cognition. So in other words, whatever is a direct object of a conceptual consciousness is not necessarily permanent. Is that what it says here?
Seems to.
Okay. Posit that.
Mm.
Taking the conceptual consciousness again on the example of conceptual consciousness apprehending vas. So it follows that its direct object is not necessarily permanent.
Why? Because the conceptual consciousness is thinking about an impermanent thought.
There's a problem with your connection. You're frozen.
One second.
Can you still hear me?
Wi-Fi.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi. Oh, yeah. Now it's moving again. I can still hear you, but you were all frozen.
Could it be that the actual object of that conceptual consciousness is an impermanent vase, and then it goes via permanent meaning generality?
Well, first of all, it says in general the direct object. We're now focusing on the direct object. What does direct object mean here? Because we haven't used that term really. So the direct object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vas is permanent, right? That we've all agreed on. But then it says here, it is not contradictory for a conditioned thing to be the direct object of conceptual cognition. So Maya is saying the vas. Could it be that the vas is the direct object of the conceptual mind apprehending vas? Okay, I can't hear you now. It stopped again. The internet stopped again.
Yes.
Can you hear us, Kashima?
Yeah, I
Kashima?
can hear you, but you're no longer moving.
We're having a problem with our computer, but it seems like the audio is still coming through clearly.
Yeah, the audience is coming through. So never mind the movement. I don't need to see you. Okay, great. So give me an example. So Maya said the vase is the direct object. Is that right, Maya? The
Yeah.
vase? Yes. Why is it the direct object?
Just because I'm really
Oops, now you're totally gone. Hello? Okay, you guys. I can see on Ornella, Rohini, Tika, and Tenzin Yudrin. In the meantime, what do you think? What does the direct object mean? So as Maya said, in the case of a conceptual consciousness apprehending vas, vas is the direct object. Why is it the direct object? The direct object the direct object itself is permanent. So we've heard that the direct object here, the meaning generality is also the direct object, and so is the vas. Why are the meaning generality and the vas the direct object of that conceptual consciousness? Arnella, go ahead. You unmuted yourself.
Because it has to be like a permanent or an image for the conceptual consciousness.
No. We've just heard two statements. So there are two statements. One is that the direct object itself is permanent. So the direct object itself refers to the appearing object. But whatever is the direct object doesn't have to be permanent. And Maya correctly said, okay, so what is an example of a direct object of a conceptual consciousness apprehending vas that is not permanent? It's the vas.
The vase, okay.
Now we've learned both the appearing object, that is the meaning generality of vas, and vas are the direct object. And I want to find out why. Why are both the appearing object, both the meaning generality of the vas and the vas, why are they both the direct object?
Direct object.
What could be the reason?
Because in this school, the vase is like the mind apprehending the vase is it's a direct value cognition, right?
No, it's a conceptual mind. It's like the example, the subject is the conceptual mind apprehending vas. Okay, that's the example. Conceptual mind apprehending vas. And the direct object of that mind, just in general, refers to the meaning generality. But whatever is the direct object of that particular conceptual mind, It's
Mhm.
not necessarily permanent, and therefore an example would be the vase. Oh, there they're back.
They are okay.
Okay. All right, but I can't. Can you hear me? Serkong Institute, I mean the class. Okay, they're having some problems today. So why are both the appearing object and the vase the direct object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase?
Mm.
Anyone else? Rohini? Rohini, I don't know whether I pronounce it correctly. Tika, Venerable Denzin Yudrun. Yes,
I'm not
Denzin.
sure that I understand the question, because I accept that both of them is impermanent.
No. The meaning generality of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase, the meaning generality of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase, is that permanent or impermanent?
Impermanent.
The meaning generality, the generic image. No, the generic
Like,
image of the vase is always permanent. Okay.
so what? So I'm not sure that I understand what Maya. What
Maya
Maya
said.
say?
All right. Okay. Let me just. Okay.
We can see you.
Yeah. Okay. I can. You're back. Great. All right. So I just had a discussion with everyone else here. So Maya, everyone else on Zoom who was still there. So Maya, why did you say that the direct object, that the vase is the direct object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase?
Because I was trying to see what seems logical to me, how a conceptual mind which is using a mediator which is permanent can still engage with things which are impermanent.
All right. Is it clear to everyone? First of all, let's see. Even though the direct object is not itself impermanent, that's what it says. So first of all, the direct object itself. What is that direct object itself?
Good question. I don't know what the direct object is.
The meaning generality of
The meaning generality.
Okay.
It is the meaning generality. So the meaning generality here, it could only be the meaning generality. We're talking about an conceptual consciousness apprehending vase, especially since it says in the next sentence that particular concept, or that a conceptual consciousness can also have a direct object that is impermanent. That implies that its main object must be impermanent in the first place. Because otherwise, what would you posit? Does that make sense? So here, when this says the direct object itself, it's a slightly different, it's a slightly unusual way of talking. The thing itself. Do you find that a lot? That although examples or instances of something can be something different, the thing itself is here in this case said to be permanent. So again, the direct object itself is permanent. Through this, we know the direct object that is permanent in the case of a conceptual consciousness has to be the meaning generality. Okay, that's been established. But if it is the meaning, if it is the direct object, it doesn't have to be permanent. See, look at the next sentence. According to the explanations of some earlier Buddhist epistemologists, it is not contradictory for a conditioned thing, for an impermanent thing, to be a direct object of conceptual cognition. So this is saying if it is the direct object of conceptual cognition, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be permanent. So it itself, the direct object itself, is permanent. It refers to the meaning generality. But if it is the direct object of a conceptual cognition, it doesn't have to be permanent. And Maya said correctly, the vase. So why are both the meaning generality and the vase, the meaning generality of the vase and the vase, why are they both the direct object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase? Come on, guys, you've done this
Yes or no?
before. Yes.
Maybe because this is particular vase, or
No,
Because
no,
of this,
no.
this
It's not a
is
particular vase. It's a vase. I mean, I didn't specify. I didn't say a particular vase. I
specific.
said conceptual
Okay,
consciousness apprehending vase. So it's just vase.
okay.
What did we say? What did we talk about before? Being apprehended or being realized. Okay, direct. Okay.
Is it because it's not, what we're talking about is not a meaning generality in this case, but it is something that is, the object that is,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, here the word that is often used is explicit object.
Explicit.
Object. All right. So direct object here, oftentimes a different word is used, explicit and implicit. So, okay, here the translators chose the word direct, which is also okay. But if I say the explicit object is not itself a functioning thing, and then later on I say whatever is the explicit object is not necessarily permanent, why is the vase as well as the appearing object, why are the meaning generality and the vase both the explicit object? Now you know.
Yeah, because both appear.
They both appear. That's
Yeah.
it. Because they both appear.
Yeah.
There couldn't be any other reason, because you see, you have only a limited amount of possibilities.
Right.
You have the appearing object, which is the meaning generality that is not apprehended. You have the vase that is apprehended. So it could not have to do with being apprehended or not apprehended, because one is, the meaning generality is apprehended, the vase is not. The only thing the two have in common in relation to that conceptual mind, and that being therefore the reason for it being called direct object or explicit object, is that they both appear. Right? Okay, so we shouldn't confuse, first of all, appearing object, appearing, and being apprehended. Okay, so the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness is always permanent. That which appears to a conceptual consciousness doesn't have to be permanent.
Keshima,
Yes.
does the direct object, does it appear by the meaning generality?
Pardon?
Does the direct object
Yes.
appear to a conceptual consciousness, or does it appear via the meaning generality?
The direct object itself is the meaning generality. The direct object itself is the meaning generality, but whatever is the direct object is not necessarily the meaning generality. Like, this is a really, it's a new way of thinking about things. In Buddhist philosophy, there are certain concepts that when you say it in general is such and such, but whatever is that, it doesn't have to be such and such. Does that make sense? For instance, the isolative vase is permanent. Whatever is the isolative vase is not necessarily permanent. Remember? Right? The isolative vase is permanent, but whatever is the isolative vase doesn't have to be permanent. So think along these lines. Okay, so whatever is the isolative vase is not permanent, because vase is the isolative vase, but it's not permanent. So similarly here, the appearing object of the direct object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase is permanent. It refers to the meaning generality. But whatever is the direct object, whatever appears to that mind. So here, direct object means that which appears to conceptual consciousness. In fact, it's on the next page. No, on the third page or fourth page. Well, somewhere in this material, showing, or well, implied by your answer is that you didn't read it. Do you actually read the material in advance? Ever? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have the time to do it?
No.
There's no time to do it. Okay. All right. Anyway, it is what it is. Okay. So the direct object means that which appears to the mind. All right. So thus a distinction needs to be made between the appearing object and the direct object of conceptual cognition. The appearing object is what is it follows that whatever is the appearing object is necessarily It's not necessarily impermanent. It's not necessarily permanent.
Except.
Except.
I say it again. It follows that whatever is the appearing object is not necessarily permanent.
Okay. Except
Except.
Posited.
vase.
But.
It follows the vase is the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness.
Except.
Why?
Why?
It follows the appearing object can be impermanent. It follows there's no difference between the appearing object and the direct object.
Why?
Why?
Why? Because whatever is the appearing object is necessarily the direct object. Whatever is the direct object is necessarily the appearing object. Don't forget what you just said. Whatever is the appearing object is not necessarily permanent. That's what you just said. And then my argument would be it follows that the appearing object and the direct object of a conceptual consciousness are synonymous. You're saying why? And my answer was because the appearing object and the direct, whatever is the appearing object is necessarily the direct object of that conceptual consciousness, and whatever is the direct object is necessarily the appearing object of that conceptual consciousness.
Reason not established.
It follows that the first reason is not established or the second reason is not established.
So, if it is the direct object, it's not necessarily the appearing object of that conceptual consciousness.
Posited. In the case of the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase. Let's continue with that.
I think.
The
Yeah,
vase, right? So therefore, whatever is the appearing object is necessarily permanent.
Except.
Okay, because you said why earlier. Okay, great. So
Well,
that
if you just stated in general, if you said the appearing object is necessarily impermanent, then
Yeah.
I would why. But if you say
No,
the
no.
appearing of a
But
conceptual,
I said whatever is the appearing object of the conceptual cognition here. Whatever is the appearing object of a conceptual cognition, it follows it's not necessarily permanent.
but earlier you didn't include of a conceptual cognition.
I did. Of course, we're talking about here only about the conceptual cognition. You don't repeat it time and again. If I posit it first, we talk about conceptual cognition the whole time. You don't always need to repeat it over and over again, right? So here we're talking about the conceptual consciousness apprehending the vase. That's the kind of example. So whatever is that appearing object, it is necessarily permanent. I was trying to make sure that you remember that the appearing object and direct object of a conceptual cognition are different, right? As it says here. Okay, maybe you just misunderstood. Never mind, it doesn't matter. Okay, hopefully that's clear. The appearing object of a conceptual consciousness must always be permanent and the direct object doesn't have to be. Okay. Then you have the conceived object. It refers to the object in terms of how a person or a conceptual cognition conceives it when apprehending it. All right, so something else here is the conceived object. That shows us how a person, why do we say person here? How a person? How, what does it mean? Like, no, sorry, what does it mean a person here? So a person conceives something. Why? It follows that there's no reason why a person conceives something. Why do we say a person conceives something? Posit that person. A person that conceives something. Give me an example, posit an example of a person that conceives something.
Kelsey?
Just Kelsey?
Okay. I think that's it.
So why does Kelsey conceive something? Oh, I can't hear. Why does Kelsey conceive something?
Because I have a mind.
So it follows that every mind conceives its object.
It means conceptual.
It's conceptual minds.
Yeah. Okay. So it follows that Kelsey has a conceptual mind in her continuum.
Yeah.
Yes. And why does she conceive something? Yeah. So because She has a conceptual mind in her continuum. Okay, great. You guys, are you actually, is this all too much with this class? I'm thinking,
No.
no? You seem overwhelmed with the material and yeah. Anyway, yeah, well, we can make some adjustments if you're overwhelmed. Okay, anyway, so the conceived object, of course, refers to the object that is apprehended by a conceptual mind. We're still with the conceptual mind. Therefore, we say, okay, so a person conceives something because their mind does so, and in this case, it's the conceptual mind. All right. For example, a pot is conceived of a conceptual cognition or a person thinking this is a pot. In cases where the way of conceiving accords with reality, such as a conceptual cognition apprehending sound to be impermanent, the conceived object exists. So conceiving basically means to think about something. I guess you could say thinking and conceiving are the same. Thinking was is impermanent, or apprehending with a conceptually apprehending a vase to be impermanent or conceiving a vase to be impermanent mean the same thing. But in cases where the way of conceiving does not accord with reality, so in this case, sorry, sound being impermanent, therefore, this process of conceiving its object in the case of the mind that apprehends sound to be impermanent accords with reality. But in cases, of course, where the way of conceiving its object is not in accordance with or does not accord with reality, the conceived object does not exist. What is an example? A conceptual cognition apprehending sound to be permanent. The conceived object and the engaged object are synonymous in the case of a conceptual consciousness. Since non-conceptual consciousnesses do not conceive in such terms as this is such and such, so thinking this is such and such, a conceived object is not posited for them. All right, so conceived object only applies to conceptual mind. The engaged object exists in the case of a person and of a cognition that accords with reality. All right, so it follows that the engaged object exists in the case of a person and of a cognition that accords with reality. It follows that the engaged object does not exist in the case of a person and of a cognition that does not accord with reality.
Except.
So it follows that there is no engaged object for a mind that does not accord with reality.
There is no engaged object. Why?
Because it doesn't exist.
No pervasion.
If it doesn't exist, it's not there. It follows that something that exists is not there. Right?
Yes, I'd accept that.
So it follows that there is no engaged object in the case of a mind that doesn't perceive its object in accordance with reality. I
think why?
Because not being there and not existing have the same meaning.
I think no
Reason
pervasion.
established.
It follows that there's no blue snow mountain.
Why? I mean, yes. Okay,
It
so
follows that there is a blue snowman. It follows that there's permanent sound.
why?
So it follows there's no permanent sound. It follows permanence. So it follows that something not being there and something not existing have the same meaning. Mean the same. So it follows that there's no engaged object of a wrong consciousness.
Why?
Why?
Because it doesn't exist.
No pervasion. No pervasion.
All right. So not being there and not existing are not, it follows that not being there and not existing are not synonymous, right? Okay, you can insist, never mind. But I mean, yeah, so the engaged object, usually, of course, you would say, I mean, it becomes really difficult because then if they're not synonymous, then also in the case of that's the blue snow mountain, you would have to say there is a blue snow mountain, but it doesn't exist. So,
Yeah.
right, comes a little difficult, but never mind. Okay. So the engaged object exists in the case of a past and a cognition that accords with reality. A pot is posited both as the engaged object of an I consciousness apprehending a pot and of a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot. According to the theory that verbal statements too possess conceived objects and engaged objects, I mentioned that before, it's one of those topics, it's actually called object of terms, of the object of terminology. That's a topic that comes towards the end of the Pramanavartika, the first chapter of the Pramanavartika, sorry. So in there, it is mentioned that verbal statements, which consist of words, they possess conceived objects and engaged objects. And so what are these objects? The expressed reference of a verbal statement. So in this case, it's really the linguistic referent. You could use that word. What is the linguistic referent? What is the referent of the word was? Yeah, exactly. So the conceived object of the word was, the conceived and the engaged object, in both cases you would talk about a conceived object and an engaged object. The conceived and engaged object of the was is was itself. So it's always the expressed referent or the linguistic referent. All right, so they would both be considered to be its conceived object as well as its engaged object. We may wonder, do all instances of awareness have 4 objects? No, there are many variations, many different possibilities. Some types of consciousness have 4 objects, whereas others have 2 or 3. So the 4 that we had before, those 4, appearing object, observed object, and here appearing object and observed object mean the same, are synonymous. Conceived object, which always refers to a conceptual mind, and engaged object, which refers to only a conceptual mind or also other minds?
All signs.
Also other minds. Okay, great. So conceived object, object of engagement refers to both conceptual and non-conceptual. All right, if you remember that, then here we've heard a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot or a vase has 4 objects. The appearance as a pot to a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot is both the appearing object and the observed object of a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot. And the pot is both the conceived object and the engaged object of that conceptual cognition apprehending a pot. Does that make sense? Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? The conceived object, because it's the object of engagement or the engaged object of a conceptual mind. An I consciousness, in contrast, apprehending yellow, has only 3 objects. Okay, which one is missing? Which one doesn't it have? The conceived object. Very good. An I consciousness apprehending yellow has only 3 objects. Yellow is all 3. The appearing object, the observed object, and the engaged object of an I consciousness apprehending yellow. A conceptual cognition apprehending a rabbit's horn has just 2 objects. The appearance as a rabbit's horn to a conceptual cognition apprehending a rabbit's horn is both the appearing object and the observed object of that conceptual cognition. Even though a rabbit's horn is the conceived object and the engaged object of that conceptual cognition, it doesn't exist. So there is no conceived object, there's no engaged object, but it can be posited. Right? Or if you want to say there is, it's okay, but it doesn't exist. It can be posited. The horns of the rabbit are the conceived object and the engaged object of a conceptual mind apprehending the horns of a rabbit, right? They're both. However, they don't exist. So the conceived object doesn't exist, the engaged. So in Tibetan, you would formulate it in this way. You would say, well, they don't exist, but they can be posited. Okay, all right. Moreover, in the case of, so it follows that the appearing object, it follows that the appearing object of the horns of a rabbit, it follows that whatever is the appearing object of the conceptual mind apprehending the horns of a rabbit is necessarily the meaning generality.
Accept.
Yeah.
Okay. It follows that the horns of the rabbit are not the appearing object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit.
Why?
Why?
It follows that the horns of the rabbit are the appearing object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit.
Agree. No, they are.
Agree. You just said agree, right? You said why, so now you need to agree. So it
Agree.
follows that the horns of the rabbit are the appearing object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit.
Agree.
Agree.
Why?
So it follows whatever is the appearing object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit is not necessarily permanent.
Why?
Oh.
Because the horns of the rabbit are that appearing object and the horns of the rabbit are not permanent. Did you follow the debate?
Yeah.
Right? So here the question is, are the horns of the rabbit the appearing object? We've heard that the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness can never be impermanent, right?
Yeah.
But can the horns of so of course the horns of the rabbit are not impermanent, so no problem. However, the question is, are the horns of the rabbit the appearing object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit?
Why?
Why?
Why not?
Is this the meaning generality of the horns of a rabbit?
I think because
Oh.
horns of
It follows that the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness is necessarily a meaning generality.
except.
Yeah.
It is the observed object.
The observed or appearing object. No, I'm saying it follows that the that the appearing object or the observed object of a conceptual consciousness is necessarily the meaning generality of the main object of that conceptual consciousness. So it follows unconditioned space is not the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness apprehending unconditioned space.
Except.
Yeah, except.
It follows that it is because Benjamin Sondaba says so in his illuminating the intent of the exposition of valid cognition.
Okay.
Yeah, so here he says that the unconditioned space. So in other words, whatever is the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness apprehending its object doesn't have to be the meaning generality, because unconditioned space is such an example.
Okay.
But sorry, so if it's the appearing objects of a conceptual consciousness, it's necessarily a meaning generality or a permanent phenomena?
No, it's not necessarily a meaning generality, but it's necessarily a permanent phenomenon.
So it follows,
Yes, go ahead.
yellow is a permanent phenomena?
Unconditioned space.
No, yellow.
Yellow. No. That was not my example. I said whatever is the conceptual consciousness, whatever is the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness is necessarily the meaning generality. And some of you agreed. So it follows that unconditioned space is a meaning generality because it's the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness.
No, but I'm following the text, because in the text says that yellow is the appearing object, the observed object, and the engaged object of an unconscious.
You may follow the text, but I'm debating, so you have to answer what I'm debating. I'm not debating that. I left that. Yes, of course, you're right what you're saying, but that's not the example I gave, right? I'm debating what's in the text. So, so far, we've not really heard about a conceptual consciousness apprehending something permanent. So that's why I'm bringing this in. Well, actually, we moved on to the conceptual consciousness apprehending a rabbit's horn, which comes after the example of the yellow. And so I ask you, are the horns of a rabbit the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit, right? And so you were undecided about it. And some of you said yes, some said no. But then I brought in another example. I said, no, I didn't bring another example. I said, in general, is whatever is the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness necessarily the meaning generality of the main object of that conceptual consciousness? And some of you agreed. And that's when I posited unconditioned space,
Mhm.
right? Because just to remember, the easiest would be just to remember this. Whatever is the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness doesn't have to be the meaning generality, but it has to be permanent. It has to be permanent. And so whatever is permanent, and here with the horns of the rabbit, you can have two views, basically. Some would say it is the meaning generality, is the appearing object. Some would not agree. But never mind that. So leave aside something non-existent, but something permanent that is also apprehended by that mind. That is, in fact, the main object of a particular conceptual consciousness must be the appearing object of that conceptual consciousness. Right? So if you have a conceptual consciousness apprehending unconditioned space, or that apprehends permanence, the permanence of the isolate of pot, or that apprehends the isolate of pot itself, what is the appearing object? It's both the meaning generality of the isolate of pot and the isolate of pot. They're both the appearing object because they're both permanent. Right? Okay. Yeah. Anyway, time is up. So if you have a little bit of time, if you could read the rest of this chapter, otherwise never mind. But yeah, if you could try, great. So let's recite the dedication.
Having thoroughly investigated in accord with all parameters, day and night through the full reasoning,
reflection on these topics of contemplation makes discernment sever all doubts.
All right. Thank you. And see you tomorrow.